When Far Cry 3 released in 2012, it felt groundbreaking. Its tropical sandbox, chaotic freedom, and intense character moments redefined what many players expected from an open-world FPS. Today, the game is still spoken of with reverence, but revisiting it reveals a more complicated picture. Some parts remain worth mentioning, others, once innovative, now feel like relics of an era gone by. The game's most enduring strength remains Voss, brought to life through an outstanding performance by Michael Mondo. Voss isn't just a villain, he's a presence. His erratic delivery, simmering menace, and magnetic unpredictability elevate every scene he's in. Even now, more than a decade later, his monologues feel genuinely unsettling, and the infamous definition of insanity sequence still hits with the same sharp edge. It's rare that a single character can imprint such a lasting identity on an entire franchise. But Voss did exactly that. Michael Mondo's performance is the kind of lightning in a bottle portrayal that changed not only the franchise, but the larger landscape of video game antagonists. Even after all these years, and many Ubisoft villains later, Voss still stands tall as the series' defining face. However, once you look past Voss, Far Cry 3 hasn't aged quite as gracefully. The game's open world design, once praised as liberating, now feels formulaic. Clearing outposts, climbing towers, crafting gear, and liberating regions were all fresh ideas in 2012. But these systems have since been copied, refined, and evolved by countless other games, many within Ubisoft's own catalog. Back then, this structure was exciting, a sense of constant progression wrapped in emergent chaos. But over the years, it's become repetitive and overly rigid. Today's open-world games lean more heavily into player choice, dynamic environments, and systems that evolve over time. Far Cry 3's world, though visually striking, feels somewhat static by comparison. The story also shows its age. The narrative, while criticized even at release, stands out even more sharply today. Jason Brody's transformation from tourist to Rambo happens so fast and with so little nuance that it undermines the emotional stakes the game attempts to build. When placed against modern storytelling trends that favor layered arcs and more culturally conscious framing, Far Cry 3's writing can feel simplistic and at times uninspired. Meanwhile, characters introduced as important receive far less depth than the spectacular villain who overshadows everyone. The imbalance contributes to the feeling that the story loses momentum halfway through, especially after Voss's role diminishes. Mechanically, the gunplay remains fun, but the AI is noticeably dated, behaving with the predictability of older shooters. The world, though lush, lacks the level of interactivity and emergent behavior that players now expect from expansive sandboxes. Unfortunately, the once stunning island also shows its age. The foliage and lighting remain appealing, but character animations, facial expressions, and environmental details are noticeably antiquated compared to today's standards. However, Voss remains one of gaming's most iconic villains, and still outshines many modern antagonists. But as a whole package, the game shows its cracks. Innovations that once felt revolutionary have become standard, and its narrative choices feel frozen in a time before the industry matured in certain ways. The game is a fascinating snapshot of a transitional moment in open-world gaming. A masterpiece of character work wrapped in systems and storytelling that haven't quite stood the test of time. It influenced an entire decade of open-world design and set a new bar for villain-driven storytelling. Voss's performance is the game's immortal core, the reason many players still talk about Far Cry 3. He is the emotional anchor, the narrative spark, and the element that still feels modern. Far Cry 3 is a fascinating time capsule. It contains one of gaming's greatest villains, and several unforgettable moments, wrapped in a design framework that no longer feels as bold or dynamic as it once did. The game's influence is undeniable, but that influence also exposes how much its systems have been eclipsed by newer, more flexible, and more immersive open-world experiences.